they follow are different from noxious weed board. Noxious weed has their own code and law.
And the noxious weed board, they give us.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Monday. We're going through budget workshop, and I'll just turn it over to Kathy.
Okay, Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. You have Texas-sized notebooks for the budget, although I don't think it will require it, but we went overboard. So we're at 9, but I'd like to point out on tab 8, last session I handed out a handout of all the general fund compared 24 revised budget to 25 revised budget. And
If I could interrupt you for just a moment.
yes.
Can you upgrade me, Bailey, or impanel me?
So your notebook should have under section 7. I'm sorry, 7. That was last week. We had handed out a pie chart to show you the makeup of the general fund by department. And then the next sheet after that was a comparison of 24 revised budget to 25 proposed budget. And I'm happy to report that after reviewing a couple of more in Superior Court, we made some reduction in expenses, proposed expenses. And so our year-to-year change is now 1.7 million versus previously it was 1.9 million. So that was good news, and I thought you should know that. And so now on to tab 8, which is, I'm going to discuss non-departmental, because non-departmental was the third largest or the top 3 funds in general fund as far as expenditures. And I thought I would go over that one with you. There's a printout, a financial printout that shows you the components of the revenues in non-departmental. And the majority of the revenue is under miscellaneous. And that revenue is actually, I'm forecasting it to go up just slightly, $33,000. And I'll get into the details of that. And then on the expenditure side for non-departmental, we have our revised 24 budget, and our revised 24 budget personnel, it's showing it going up, but it really isn't, because as in the 24 budget, as we transfer out funds to other general fund departments for termination pay, our budget goes down. And so we're resetting the 25 budget to be equal to what we expect in vacation payouts or termination payouts of vacation and sick leave. So that's approximately $364,000. And that's typical for the past several years, what has been budgeted for that. And then under services, we're showing that services are actually going down. And this is where we went and analyzed our services. And the good news was that we found that there was a budget from, I think from 23 that had included a payout for one of the fire districts for some equipment. And so that was a one-time item. And so we had continued to budget it. And so I've now reduced that budget. That was about a $200,000 reduction. So, and then debt service, we're showing debt service slightly increasing. That's due to the amortization schedule. And then capital, we're maintaining that same budget. And then transfers, a little bit more in detail, but basically going down just slightly.
So Kathy, on the capital budget, it's 125,000. What is the expectation for that fund being used for?
It is just there for emergency type situation in the event that facilities doesn't have enough budgeted. We have a little bit of an emergency fund in the non-departmental for them, just in case. That's for an unknown. So for example, this year I have 125,000 budgeted, but we haven't utilized any of it. So.
Thank you.
So on the revenues, in a little bit more detail if you'd like, the revenues for non-departmental, the major item in the miscellaneous is the landfill rent, and that's 7.5 million of the total. Another miscellaneous item that's in there is a payment that comes from the PFD for a debt that they have, that they pay us, and then we transfer the funds to debt servicing. And then that's the majority of the miscellaneous, those two items right there.
Now, the landfill amount is set based on evaluation of the
Right, and
landfill.
yeah, so
So
on
that
an
could-
on
That
an
can change over time as the valuation changes.
yeah, so on an annual basis, we look at that each year, and we put together based upon historical criteria that was established when the rent was first established. It's a 6% return on the value of the landfill, and so we're continuing to use that 6%. But the landfill value is what's important there in calculating that. So right now, I don't know off the top of my head, but I document that in a file, put a memo together that it's presented to Mike Moss. And so that we have documentation that we're charging an appropriate amount and we're not exceeding that calculation that was established several years ago.
Yeah.
Do they use a cap rate of some number?
Just the 6%.
Okay, but it's very difficult to put a value on a going concern, particularly when
Right.
it's hard to decide what the asset base is, and do we include things like the cleanup account, and do we take into account the liabilities that we have implicit regardless? And
Yes.
I don't know the answer to any of those. I'm not sure it's that important. I'm just trying to point out that this should be heaven for someone who wishes to justify number X over number Y. I can move it any way I want.
Yeah. The calculation, Public Works provides information as far as how much of the landfill has been utilized. They give me some information as far as, and that takes into consideration that there's, as we fill it up, there's less cells, and so.
So let me see.
Yeah.
Today we have a formula of some kind, takes all these
Yes.
factors into account. And that formula was determined in concert with the legal aid help that we get.
Yes, several years ago.
And that those assumptions today may be different tomorrow also. not just in the valuation, but in the algorithms. True?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
So you don't do the calculations. That's given to us by Sean.
Right,
Right.
right. And
So details, that's a Sean Roy question.
Oh,
'Cause-
I'm not
'cause,
looking for the
yeah,
details, but
oh,
yeah,
yeah, that's
I'm just
the-
saying, I'm following up my comment earlier. We've got the city of Longview raising property taxes and all that, raising the tax base because they're spending more. And I would have general questions that how do you want us to deal with the budget? Like, I find it extremely hard to understand things if I don't, for example, I would like to have one number that says our revenue through taxes and is blah, de blah. Our revenue through grants, and I don't care divided where, which way. The point is, I'm trying to find what money we can count on, what money depends on the good graces. Like when you go for grants, those are not guaranteed. So as we walk out on a plank, I don't want to say to the constituency, oh, well, we didn't get that grant and therefore your taxes are up. And so I was going to basically ask you at some point, is there, if you were to start all of this from scratch in terms of reporting how it is, would you be doing what you're doing now, or would you come up with something that you feel is a little more appropriate for understanding the problem? So.
possibly, yes. I did provide, back to your point on tab 7, I
Right.
have,
Right, that was a good.
Yeah. yeah, it's a good tab. Tab 7 does have, that's as far as general revenue, the first page, not the first page, the third page, not the third page in, is a budget management review slide. And it has just what you said, where are all of our, where's our tax revenue? What is it we're budgeting for tax revenue? And the total for the general fund is about it's over $33 million just for taxes. And so this has the different categories of what you're asking. And I can run it also for all funds. For this presentation that we did last week, I just did general fund to concentrate on that.
Which is only a portion of the taxes we collect.
Right.
The road fund is totally, it's not included in this, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
But that gives you an idea. Taxes, we have 33 million budgeted. And then as far as total expenses for general fund, we have 76 million budgeted. So anyway, so that's.
So Kathy, I have a more specific question on your revenues for the non-departmental funds. The second line on that sheet of paper on page 1 shows franchise fees and royalties significantly less than previous years. Is that a conservative cushion?
Very conservative number.
Or, because you don't do that for every revenue. Sometimes you bring it right across.
Yeah,
So-
for that one, I did.
You're not expecting a decline in that. We just don't know for
No,
sure.
right. I did a very conservative number because not knowing how the industry is going on that particular industry, the cable industry. I tried to do a conservative number because, as you can see, 22 revenue was 383,000, 23 revenues 372,000. Through midpoint in June, we're at about if I forecasted 350. So I'm trying to be conservative on that number Do I think it's going to come in at 200? I think it's going to come in more higher, but I was being conservative.
Of course, the big unknown right now, based on what's happened in the latest news, Boeing is laying off 17,000 employees. Now, that's corporation-wide, so we don't know what the target is, but it's a major employer in Washington State, so a good number of those will come. Not necessarily a concern for Cowlitz County, because we may have a few employees that go down to Portland and work for Boeing, but any department that depends on state grants is going to find some different messages coming from the legislature.
Yeah.
Those grants have been pretty generous so far as they've tried to beef up particularly mental health and substance abuse treatment programs. Not as much, I would anticipate not as much money coming in, but that's for our discussion with Health and Human Services.
Yeah, and to add what you just said, we're still basking in the aftermath of a huge chunk of ARPA money, which changes our attitude about things.
Yeah. You know, and when you have big corporations like that, they're not located in Cowlitz County. When I worked up in Auburn, it was amazing how many small businesses I worked with that did projects for Boeing, and you see that, and that's just one example. I mean, so you have that trickle down. You could have businesses down here that make a widget for Boeing, who knows, you know, but.
Well, as a fresh young high school graduate, I went to the University of Washington in the fall of 1970. And I saw the billboard that they put up saying, the last person out of Seattle, turn off the lights, because that was the height of the Boeing recession that put the state into a real tailspin. And I mean, it was harsh. We've never had one quite as severe caused by a local failure, but we've certainly had recession since then.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I was asking. I feel uncomfortable that we do a budget always based on what was done last year, as opposed to starting from scratch and say, we can expect this amount of income for sure, and we can expect this amount of income probably, and then we can decide how we're going to allocate. So, okay, 65% of this goes to law and justice, and that way, and then we create a budget within our means. The way we have it now is just not clear that we'll stay within our means, and that's why you've passed out an alarm.
Mhm, yep.
So I know you understand this completely.
Getting into non-departmental expenses, so that you have an understanding of where some of those expenses are. We have, and that's the expenditure. It's on, I'm back to tab 8. And it's the revised expenditure request, and it has all the different line items. And so it has a column that says change difference budget for 25 budget difference. It's looking at the last approved budget, which this was a 2-year budget. So it's looking at the last time we approved the 2025 budget for the second year of the biennium. And so I did put a slight increase on dues and subscriptions. Some of our subscriptions or dues are actually, for example, right now I have an estimate of the total for all dues that we're currently paying of about $240,000. But then we have a request from the COG for a one-time payment for their move, which is it's a little over $19,000. So if I were to include that, we're at
I'm sorry, how much?
$19,000.
$19,000, yeah.
They took their move, which they estimate will be about $50,000, and they allocated it out to the membership based upon the same ratios that they currently allocate their membership dues. And so for us, that's not quite half, but approaching half of their move cost.
Here is an administrative question, and Dennis probably knows best. If we approve the budget, does that automatically say we concede that we will pay 19,000?
Jim? Yes.
Okay, and if we wish to set that aside for the future board to decide if they wish to do that, how would we do that?
Well, you would take it out of the budget.
Just take it out of the budget?
Well, I mean, that's what I would.
Yeah, that's
expect.
what I think, but
And so some of the details for the dues and subscription are the largest item that we're paying is our dues for, our dues for Cowlitz, the Council of Governments, which that's estimated to be 131,000. So they provided the estimate already. It's 111,000 for the actual base dues. And then there's a 20,000 grant match that's included in the total. So that's 131,000. So that's by and far the largest payment out of our dues and subscription.
So, Mr. Chairman, is there any appetite to, at this point in time, push those out to a decision by the new board, all the subscriptions? This is an example of it.
Yeah.
We always follow year after year doing the same thing, and new eyes are going to come. They can review it.
Your fresh look on it.
Well, it's also true that any future commission can amend the budget and take money out if they don't want to go forward with it.
So that's part two of your answer to my question.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we actually have it built into our policy that we review the budget at least once a quarter, and it's about monthly, the way things change. So.
The only argument the only thing I can think of that makes that uncomfortable is that there's a sense of entitlement, and it's much easier not to put something in than it is to take something out after it's been put in.
So everything in that category is like
You have your
COG, WASAC,
COG's the largest one. Then
all that kind of stuff is what I'm guessing.
yeah, then you have your Washington Association of County Officials, Washington Association of Counties. You have your National Association of Councils, which is a very small item. And you have your Kelso Longview Chamber of Commerce, which is like $2,500. So.
CEDC?
No, that is actually in the rural, right now it has been in the rural public facilities for $55,000 to help support their budget out of the rural public facilities.
So if you had those out of there, then when they came due in 2025, it would just be, it would come through agenda item as an agenda item?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to pay, if we reduce this budget, I wouldn't be able to pay any of these when they submit their billings.
So when they submitted the billing, then it would come through as an agenda item, and then you get authorized to pay or authorized to not pay.
Right,
Correct.
and then amend the budget.
So if we pass the budget with all these items in there, and then you would come before the board at some point in time and say, I just got a bill for $19,000 for move expenses. The board then could say yay or nay.
Correct.
So the new board would still have that ability whether these were in the budget or they weren't in the budget.
Yeah, if you want if you want us to bring currently the way it operates, you authorize a budget. So we have the ability to go ahead and pay those without coming to the board. But we could come to the board if you want on each one of those items before they're ever paid.
Yeah.
I would choose the simplest avenue that allows the new board to take a look at things and say, we believe this is an anachronism, or this is how we should proceed.
I guess my bottom line is if I can be assured that when those come due, that this new board will have a chance to look at them, then I can be comfortable from sitting in here. If
Yeah.
I can't be assured of that, then I just take them out.
Well, they all get paid out of my office, so I receive them and we'll bring them to the board before we process any payments.
My inclination is to take him out. That way there can be no misstep of any kind.
Well, I guess I'd just like to point out that the reason the COG is moving to a much more expensive facility is because we're kicking them out of the building across the way. And I mentioned that to you before, that when we did that, it wasn't a complete 100% savings when we switched another office from leased areas, that the dues are going to go up. And they've decided to do a one-time only assessment for the entire membership based on the formula for the dues. I think
Yeah.
it actually sends a false signal. They are actually moving, well, next month. And this is kind of late in the game to say, no, we're sticking it to you. And I mean, that's, the organization has to have a place to go. And it is true, we've been subsidizing them for a long time, but fact of the matter is, with our road construction, coming through the COG approval process, it's an organization we can't afford not to participate in. So I wish that had been part of the understanding when we kicked them out of there. Not only are you kicking out of cheap rent, but we're not going to help you anymore. That's, to me, that's not fair. If we have a problem balancing the budget, it's not going to be because of a $19,000 expenditure out of a $250 million budget.
Yeah, I personally don't have any heartburn because we are moving them, helping them with that. I'm more talking about for the services, like with Wasack, NACO, all that. I think we get questions on it when those come up. What do they do for us? Well, this is the opportunity to make sure we sit here and kind of pound that out. What does CFM do for us? I mean, I could sit here and tell you that, but I don't really have any heartburn on the 19,000, Dennis. I kind of get that.
Here's the thing, we have to be careful. We don't want to delay a lot of expenses to the next year, because then that sends a false message on what our budget is that we've approved for next year. Well, we've approved the budget, but we're keeping a whole bunch of stuff out of it. That, I think we need to be as transparent as possible. These are expenses.
Well,
The request that that the new board have a hearing to go through and understand what those, that's absolutely appropriate. I mean, we've had the discussions, particularly with COG and the value of COG, every time we have a change in leadership on this board, at least, and then at budget time. So, I mean, it's a constant discussion, and it's a good discussion, because people do need to be reminded of the value of these organizations.
Yeah, there's,
And we can agree to disagree on the value of the organizations, because it's oftentimes determined by policies that we don't make, the state and federal rules and regulations. So
there's always a finite line between issues, whether they fall on a pejorative side or non-pejorative side. I don't know what the right thing is to do, but I know the wrong thing is to not ask the question. And this discussion just reminds me of 2 points that we stumble into all the time. One's a sense of entitlement. And 2, it's a sense that it's only a dime, so who cares? And that's just one of those things we want to be careful about.
Yeah.
So asking the question is, I think, always the right thing. Assuming that only a Neanderthal would ask the question is probably not the right thing.
Yeah. I would, I have a lot of confidence in you. I think these subscription type things, if you leave it in there so everybody has a full picture of what the potential budget could be, that I can live with that, but I want to make sure that as they come up, they come to us, and the public at least gets a chance to have a review of what this organization or what this service that we're paying for does for us.
And I have no problem doing that.
Can you advise the recipients that while it's in the budget, it will still be reviewed? Because right now, by the customary approach, it's in there, it's a done deal.
Yes, well, I could do that.
that would probably be an excellent budget review program on the various organizations that we send money to.
Right.
And I think you alluded, Dennis, to a pretty important aspect, which is maybe you don't like the COG, but if many of the road funds that benefit us for some useful things have to go through the COG, then we really want to look at both sides of the coin.
Yeah, we did, I could be off on the number a little bit, but I believe we received a grant from COG, 283,000 last year on a project.
All the federal dollars for transportation, for road construction and maintenance, that all has to be approved by the COG.
Yeah.
Because the feds have said there's got to be a regional approval of those federal programs. And then there's a bunch of money the state gets and gives to us that they get from the feds too. So it also has to go through that review.
Yeah, it's
And
that.
it's an additional expense because we're talking about, a pretty hefty amount of dues for that organization. So yeah, it's kind of frustrating that we have to do that.
Yeah, and it's really important for us and the new board to understand that, like, right now, it's difficult for me to say what exactly the COG did for us. If it's simply to move the dollars, can we count on the CRAB doing that? That kind of thing. Is there already a state agency without duplicating the COG?
I see Deborah has her hand up, so
Yeah.
you must have something to, go ahead, Deborah.
Yeah, I know that these agencies that are, with these putting them in our budget for 25, they are putting it in their budget as well. So they're, expecting the funds that are approved in the budget, in their budgets for next year. And as far as Waco, they represent all of, the assessor, the auditor, the treasurer, the clerk, the prosecuting attorney, the sheriff, all of the elected officials, and they help us, you know, with all sorts of things, and they help us with our legislative items that we are trying to pass. So all 39 counties are involved in Waco, and I can't imagine us not paying the dues for that. And the other ones, I didn't hear all the other associations that are included in there, but I know that we do need Waco. And like I said, they're all working on their budgets for next year, and they're anticipating these revenues from us. So if you're thinking about not passing them, I think that would be a more of a discussion that would need to be had.
I certainly agree with the more of a discussion. I think in many discussions, we're absent the full holistic approach. I just spoke of one with the COG. If the money has to go through there, then that puts a constraint on us, and we have to understand that. What Waco does for us materially and what Wasack does for us materially, I don't know. And I'm not very fond of, well, I'm confusing Waco with NACO. So in my head, but those guys are, those are lobbying outfits, in my opinion. And we do hire lobbyists, but as we've learned, you can, those are our lobbyists, and we can direct their particular efforts. With Wasack and Waco, it's so diffuse that I'm not, and maybe the dollars are so diffuse that it doesn't really amount to anything, but I'm thinking things need to change in the relationship between government and the taxpayer, and things that do get done or accomplished. And I don't know how to do that, but doing the same thing year in and year out probably is not the answer.
Well, as you may recall, for Wasack, they are going through a major turmoil and reorganization. King County has pulled out. And
They've
Pierce
pulled out
County-
for sure?
They haven't, they're gone, yeah. They send an observer. And Pierce County and Snohomish County have also given notice that they may be pulling out. They're curtailing their dues. And a lot of it gets around to the fact that the governance, the board of directors, is based on a modified one county, one vote. And they say for the amount of dues that we pay, we should have the vast majority of the say on what our money goes towards. And their proposal is to make it all based on population, which means Wahkiakum County would get 0.0008% of the vote at the board meeting, hardly worth their participation. But they probably are more dependent on the state organization to help them out, because they're such a small county. And we've got a lot of small counties.
Yeah, I think the big counties already have the legislature
So,
per capita, right?
well, the challenge is you only have your own local legislators that are looking out for you, but they don't, and particularly in Southwest Washington, they're not in the majority. So there's got to be some other avenues to try to get what needs to be done to help us out when state laws are in error as far as we're concerned. So,
Yeah.
So the statewide organization is important, but they are going through this this very awkward situation. The urban counties have different interests than the more rural counties. And you know, when I was in the city's government, there were two national organizations for cities: the Urban League for the big, large cities, and the National League of Cities that had the vast majority of cities, but you know, smaller population. We've tried, as long as Wasack has been an organization, they've tried to maintain one organization to represent all counties, and that's clearly, you know, that's collapsing. So there's going to be some changes. There's no doubt about that.
A few years ago, I asked the representative, don't remember who, I was curious as to what influence Wasack had on the floor with his caucus, and the answer I got floored me. Said, I've not looked at Wasack for any input at all. And I'm like, oh boy, that was contrary to what I had expected.
So I think we just, I understand Deborah's point, but I think if you let them know that we're gonna look at these subscription services as they come up, even though they're sitting here in the budget, because we don't know what's, what we're gonna look like 6 months down the road. It's hard to predict all that. So I think we just, it's a valuable conversation. I think we get questions on what some of these agencies do for us. It's the opportunity for us to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Okay, and I will take the direction of, before these come up for payment, also that they will be presented to the commissioners
Okay.
for discussion. Okay, going down the list of some of the major changes, I did make a change on the what we're forecasting for the state auditor's office, which is under the bars for budget accounting and auditing. We had budgeted $168,000. I'm forecasting $180,000. We're currently sitting at about $150,000 right now for this year. So our budget is sufficient.
What's the page we're on?
Oh, we're on page 1 of revised.
This is tab 8.
Tab 8, and we're on page 1. It's like a salmon colored. The green is revenue and the salmon colored is expenditures. It's right after the revenue. And it's about the 5th line down. So I'm budgeting a slight increase in the audit expenses. So that's an increase of 11,000, almost 12,000.
Wasn't something passed last year and they had to take on an additional role? Didn't we have to provide? I could be thinking, I thought something passed last year and they had to take on some additional time and stuff to do that.
Oh, it was a Gatsby on leases.
Yeah, it was something I know. So
And
that's
this is our state auditors. They charge us for their time.
this is the yearly thing where they come in and look at
Yep,
us.
this is
Okay.
where, yeah, this is,
That's
this
where they
is,
move, they
This is
move
them
in for,
passing on expenses to us.
yes, they pass on
Okay,
their
I got you.
expenses. And it's a non-controllable.
It's like going into Home Depot and they say, you will buy the screwdriver and you will pay
Right.
$15.
Right.
Then we go down to the,
but it's even worse because they say, if you don't, we'll go public and you'll be
Yeah.
embarrassed.
yeah. On the unemployment services, the non-departmental picks up the several of the general fund unemployment compensation cost. And the good news is we had originally forecasted like $89,000. We're now, based upon our cost allocations, it's going to come in at about $55,000. So it's a reduction of about $35,000. Then you'll see that the next section is where we have vacation, sick leave, Social Security and retirement. That has to do with some of our termination pays. And that's where we're budgeting currently. I'm budgeting $310,000 there.
So this is probably a pretty good example because it's very well constrained. So on 24, the budget, the approved budget was 87, right?
For unemployment, yes.
For salaries and the benefit.
yeah, related to unemployment only.
Okay. And, yeah, I'm always off a line. I've got to get new head. So let me just stay on that theme. So somehow that dropped down $34,000 or 35,000. What was it that changed, and is it important for us to understand that?
So 2025 originally, when we did the biennial budget, I was basing the second year of the budget closer to what the budget was estimated for 2024. We've actually seen a decline in unemployment claims related to our general fund. And so we've trued up our number for 2025 to be $55,000. So when we originally had done the 2025 second year of the biennium, both years were pretty much the same. And now based upon experience of what we're seeing, and this is one of the cost allocations that we do, where we have the actuals and then we build the departments back like a year later. So this is a true number for 2025.
So it doesn't take much to boost up the expenditures if we lay 3 employees off.
Yes.
It's a big bump up because
Yeah.
that unemployment lasts.
We pay,
for
well,
how
yeah,
many months? I mean, it's long period of
almost
time.
6 months.
So what happened at 2023 actual was substantially lower than the 2024 actuals through June?
2024, I believe, I know one of the areas that we had some pretty large unemployment cost was related to the coroner's office. We had a pretty much complete turnover in the coroner's office. And that impacted the general fund unemployment claims.
So you're just thinking, I mean, to me, it looks like the number 54,929 just
It is.
came out of thin air.
No, it didn't. It actually, because we charged the departments back 1 year later, it is actuals.
Oh,
Yeah, so I can get you the detail of,
no, that's fine. No, I understand that. It's part of my shortcoming. I count on your expertise. I'm looking at the bigger picture.
yes.
And I poke at it occasionally to try and understand something. And some things are predictable, particularly if
Yeah,
they
that one's
already
not
happened.
Yeah.
That makes it predictable.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's predictable because we charge 1 year after the unemployment claims come in.
Yeah.
Another area that we're seeing an increase in non-departmental is in our insurance charges. For the non-departmental, we pick up quite a bit of the insurance charges for all of the general funds. Instead of allocating them out, we only allocate the insurance funds out, risk management out to those departments that have billings, like the jail receives their own insurance charge because we incorporate that into the daily billing rates.
Are we still on that same page?
No, I've actually, is there a question on page 1?
Well, I'm just trying to follow on
I'm
what
sorry,
you're saying.
I'm on page 2 now, the top of page 2.
The very,
It's under other services and charges,
okay,
and it's the category of custodial, janitorial, and security. And then we have two cost allocations that increased in total. And so the non-departmental received increases to the allocations specific for general fund for both industrial accident, lost time, and for insurance, which is our risk management cost allocation of 93,000 and 73,000. And then continuing on further down, distributions to local governments. This is where I had discovered that we had been budgeting for additional allocations that weren't necessary because 2023 had a payment for some equipment and we didn't need to budget for it any longer. So that was a $300,000 decrease to the budget. And then moving our law enforcement line item is the charges. Non-departmental picks up all the charges. As you recall, the Sheriff's Department spoke about law enforcement records and their allocation method. And so general fund receives a quarterly billing for our law enforcement records, and our portion of that is paid out of the non-departmental. And so that is a $310,000 increase over what we had in our revised budget. And then continuing on to page 3, there really isn't any major changes other than in the long-term debt for the morgue. It's going up just slightly, $6,000. And then I had forecasted out that our cost for a motor pool, the last line on that page, would go up in 2025 slightly. I did a CPI index increase, but the good news is it didn't. The revised motor pool billings shows it's still at 105. And so that's a slight decrease of $3,000. And then on the page 4, these are our transfers out, primarily to other funds. And we're showing an increase in what's needed to for the victim witness program, $45,000. They needed an additional transfer. Yeah, so no, it's showing that I'm decreasing the transfer to the witness program. And then I'm decreasing $50,000 for reimbursement for public works. And then we have another transfer out, and this is where we transfer funds out for debt service. Of an increase of $553,000. This is actually the transfer out. That part of this is debt service and part of it is the amount that we transfer out for the budget stabilization fund. And when we originally had done the 2025 budget, I had missed that budget out for the budget stabilization fund. So I'm making sure that it's now in our new numbers for 2025. And that's it for non-departmental. Non-departmental also covers an expenditure for our security for the building, for the administration building. And just so y'all know, we're out for We have an RFP for that right now for the new year, for a new contract, and I've forecasted it to be pretty much flat with what we're currently paying. So, or what we currently estimate to pay for that contract, just for the administration building. The rest of the contract is in the sheriff's office for the Hall of Justice. That's the bigger one. So, and that's all I have for non-departmental.
So everything we went over today, if you go to the pie chart, just for the public, that's that 13%
Correct.
little
It's
wedge of the total
Right.
budget is what we just went over
non-departmental.
today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. And so I felt like it was important to go over non-departmental because it's one of the top 3 general funds.
Yeah, jail, sheriff, and non-department.
Yeah, and jail would be coming up later. Not today, but later.
Right. So just trying to make it clear for the public that today we were talking about this 13% wedge.
Right.
Well, we covered $10 million in an hour.
Sorry.
Now we don't have time. Now we don't have time for building and planning.
Well,
It's
They-
10 o'clock.
they have a pretty simple budget too.
I gave you a Snickers bar, be nice.
They're on tab 9, as far as their details of their budget by bars and revenue and expenses. In case you need it. Okay, okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tracy Jackson, Building and Planning. I know she's got in your book the budgets. I've got a kind of a boring budget this year, and I apologize, but a little bit conservative. I basically based what our numbers are currently coming in the door as what I'm seeing, and then I reduced it just a little bit more because I don't know what next year will end up doing to us. So I dropped our expenditures and revenue forecast down about 4.5%, 5%, just across the board. So I mean, one commercial project could completely change that picture. If the feds cut the rates, that could change what people do with their single family dwellings. But for right now, I'm just looking at it as a conservative. I'd rather be conservative and keep the staff I have than be overzealous and hope for the best.
Would you mind going through that again?
Yeah.
More slowly?
Okay.
Like you have an algorithm that says for the future, I expect to spend less than I spent last year.
That's correct.
And that's because in your algorithm, you say, I anticipate a reduction in or planning
The
activity.
the building permit activity.
Okay, and that is based on past history where we cycle through.
Past history, trends I'm seeing, we have slowed down a little bit. Now that fall is here, we have slowed down. The rainy season is here.
But that happens every year.
It does. We have less staff than what we've ever had, and we're maintaining what we've got that's coming in the door. And so I don't want to ask for additional staff or anything of that sort. I'm truly looking at the revenue that we have coming in and what we're doing with that revenue.
Okay. And we do in arrears as we allocate. What happened last year is how the other groups get billed this coming year?
No, it's more what comes in the door is what I've got that I have to work with.
Okay.
See, the challenge is, as you mentioned at the beginning, those big commercial or industrial projects,
Could sway this whole thing.
they don't happen every year.
Nope.
And so
We can
those
hope,
expenditures go up and down as the.
and I can only
the economy
predict
changes.
what kind of literally what I'm seeing coming in the door.
So your strategy for avoiding unnecessary delays because of staff shortages when we're surprised with a big development, how do you respond? What's the process?
We have 2 current contracts in place that we can contract out if we need to. But with the staff I currently have, we are maintaining with everything that is coming in the door, and we have room to play with. I can see us taking on the bigger projects.
And that is a consequence of the interest rates having gone up the last year.
They have,
or
and
so,
I-
really, but
A lot.
small business construction as well. The big corporations, they do their multi-year.
That's not gonna
capital
stop them.
improvements. No.
Nope, that's not gonna stop them. It's the current mom and pop that are doing the homeowner that is doing their one-time build in their lifetime.
It could slow them down because it still has to pencil out for the big projects.
It does.
And I remember quite a few years ago, we had the super projects where the planning, where they basically hired the planner to, we charged them enough, and then we hired people that were focused just on those.
We hired those out.
Huge projects.
Yep, we hired those out.
They were pretty spendy, so.
Yep, that was
those are
before
other
me down there.
alternatives for- So our goal is to try to get permit approvals within,
We're at 1 to 3 weeks right now, depending on what the homeowner or the construction company gives us to work with. So
that's-
we're maintaining.
that's after the pre-app conference.
Staff consultations are completely free within our office.
Right.
And we try to give them every step that they're gonna need going forward. So there's no surprises along the way.
But your 3-week timeline is.
That is from when
once
they apply.
Turn in the
To
application,
get it turned around to them. Yep.
and it moves more smoothly when they've had the
The staff
pre-app
consult, yep.
conference. And because there's nothing more frustrating than having the feeling like, oh, the rules keep changing.
Nope,
And you try to get those rules all set up ahead of time.
correct. And we put their direction in place for them to help them out.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if I come to you with full plans that cover the building plus the lot and every piece of information you need, and I just happen to be the most unusual client you've got, and I have it all, and I walk into your office, you've never seen me before, and I hand you all of that, and how soon can I get the permit done? Is that the 3 weeks?
It would be at the most 3 weeks, 1 to 3 weeks, depending on what that project is and where you fall in the line of who's being reviewed
A
in front
normal-
of
yeah,
you.
Normal, single-family dwelling,
Yep.
3,500 square feet because I've got 12 kids.
Yes.
Okay. And then if I forget to document anything in there and you've got to come back to me, that just aggregates onto the 3 weeks.
Usually we can get it back from the applicant as long as they're responsive and continue the process forward.
So within that 3 weeks, you will have been able to take a look at the problem, contacted me and said, you have too many kids. And you then, and all of that, you figure you still normally,
Mhm.
not guaranteed, normally
Right.
would be 3 weeks.
We try. We do everything we can to try. We keep the communication going within with the applicant. We want them to proceed to the end just as much as we want them to, so.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay. Let me
So-
just kind of paraphrase how I think you guys, or way it's been explained to me, you operate. We don't, you're not a general fund.
We have
You don't
3,
operate it there.
no, we're
You guys
not.
operate off
What we
your-
bring in,
what you bring in.
yes.
So you're almost like a separate, I look at you as almost a separate business unit.
We are.
If business comes in, you could bring in more and it could affect, you could spend more because you'd be paying people for more time.
Yep.
It can fluctuate a little bit, but it's really contained within that business unit. What we want to see is what we're bringing in and the fee structure is covering the expense structure.
It is.
That's really what we're concerned about here. Because you could, depending on the economy, you could fluctuate.
We have highs and lows.
Yeah.
And absolutely, we are contained within ourselves. We do have or I guess this next year, we're forecasted to have 4.11. How that split happens is funny between people, but 4.11 are paid out of the general fund. And that's kind of like more planning across the board, comp plan type work. And the other is specific to the specialized
wanted to-
revenue.
Try and be clear that you're really, I just kind of view you as a separate business unit and you operate within what
We are.
parameters you bring in.
We
and
are.
What you need to expend.
With the kind of the exception of the expenses for doing the planning commission stuff.
That's general fund,
and
yes,
The long range planning activities.
Correct.
Those are general fund subsidies.
correct.
But the vast majority of the work. that you do
We're
is a
enterprise
permitted
fund, yep.
Process that generates the revenue as people come. in.
Yes, and we separate our fund. We're separate from any other fund and we invest like anybody else does.
Overall, just to follow up, you have a monopoly
Mhm.
and we must recognize that we have to have the right individual, which in this case is you, that does not abuse the monopoly. You're-
Exactly, yeah.
So currently I have budgeted 23 positions and we currently have 22 staffed. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Over the last 2 years, we've inactivated 4 positions. So the building supervisor, an operations manager, a code tech position, and an office assistant. So we are maintaining within what we have currently. We are not proposing any fee increases for 2025. We've got lots of stuff that we're focusing on, but we are trying to do a little more outreach and try to grab as many people that want to hear us for whatever that means. That we're Mike Wayne and I went to the Rotary with Commissioner Dahl and just kind of told them what we do and try to show that we're not trying to give anybody roadblocks and we're trying to find whatever shade of gray they can find to make their project move forward is what we're about and what we're after. I'm going to be I guess the guest speaker. I'm not sure what that means either, at the Lower Columbia Contractors Association next week. So that'll be fun and interesting. So we'll have a lot of contractors and industry people there. And we're really going to promote our remote inspections. Those we rolled out last year and we don't have a lot of people taking advantage of those. So those are available, not in every situation and not for every inspection, but we do have those for more remote areas. And then the Pioneer Lions keep dinging me to come over and do a luncheon with them. So we are trying to get, we're truly trying to be customer friendly and get the word out there that we are workable. And, we have, I hope the department has changed in the last few years and that we're workable and more efficient for the services that we can provide. We're not the greatest agency, no regulatory agency is, but we always have room for improvement, but we're trying to do everything we can to make it customer friendly and customer focused. So.
You're doing a great job.
Well,
Question
it's not
on
me, it's the people I surround myself with.
That's the you.
No, well, it's the people I surround myself with.
The remote inspection,
Mhm.
at some point you actually do a on-site inspection too. It's not just 100% remote.
Some of the inspections can be 100% remote. Some of the mechanical can be 100% remote. We don't have to step foot out there if it's FaceTimed and we can prove that that's the location of yes, we have lots of checkoffs that we do, but yes,
Lots
we
of
can prove.
protection that you're
Yes,
not being.
protections, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep,
So Tracy, I just want to make sure you mentioned that you're self-supporting. You don't depend on the general fund.
correct.
So on the community long-range planning
Mhm.
documents, we have revenues of 11,000 and expenditures of 656,000.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yes,
So a little over 600,000 comes from the general fund.
that's correct.
Okay. So just
If
because
that's the long
that's a little
range
bit different
planning.
from what you said,
Well, that's
we're
the
not
long
on.
range planning and the comp plan work that will be community wide. That's the stuff that we do at the counter for generalized questions
That's the.
And
that's
it's
the-
also-
that's the four FTEs that do the.
And it also
long range.
encompasses the nuisance abatement officer that the board has located within our office.
Okay,
That's in one FTE down there.
Yeah.
okay.
Those activities are really kind of state mandated.
Yep.
Stuff, so we take that on.
And 4 or 5 pages in. we
About
get to building and
4.5,
planning. We
about
get to building and
4.5
planning,
million of a budget.
And
And
that's,
yep.
that's $4.5 million in
Correct.
expenditures on.
Correct.
and that's all generated from the fees.
Yes.
Any grants? Do we get some grants, don't we, or do we?
Not within this
That
fund,
would be
no.
community, that would be.
That would be the community
well,
long-range planning, and the only thing we have of grants right now is $11,000, and it's plaques for the Historic Preservation Society, and it goes in and out. Yep.
There was a grant prior to you in the department that eventually got transferred to the Conservation Corps, the VSP.
We do have our conservation district partnership with them for VSP, and it is a grant type position. And instead of us hiring the position, we pass the money from the state to
Right.
the conservation district. So we're just a pass through. We don't.
That's long range planning. That's part of
Correct,
the long-range planning.
correct.
Yeah.
That's it.
And the VSP program is designed to help folks in the rural areas get the kind of zoning that's helpful for them.
It helps them with the mitigation for critical areas and setbacks for floodplain that they may not have had the resources to do. It also gives them some, with the conservation district's help, some resources and some staffing that can go out there and have the expertise to go help them mitigate whatever problems that they have on their property so they can build and do what they want on their property. A great partnership to have. Good group. So that was all I had. Like I said, it was kind of a boring budget. I don't have any requests. Sorry.
You want your candy bar back?
No,
No.
I want to keep you happy all day. Thanks, gentlemen.
Is there a candy bar in the afternoon?
So we've kind of taken a little bit of public works time, but can we move right into them? We got, okay. While she's coming and get set up, I was gonna let you two know that we had a meeting with David Hodges from CFM on Thursday or Wednesday, I don't know, last week. And we did revise a little bit of how we look at a couple things. We asked him to put more emphasis on the lower Toutle, some of the erosion and that type of stuff, not forget about the upper, but more work on that. And with Army Corps, we asked him to, let's start the process and it would take a while, but to change the scope of what Army Corps is supposed to do, add something other than just flooding. I think he was gonna take a tour with Susan at some point in time and see some of the issues and how to word some of that. He is gonna work on an appropriation for if we have to build that road, the alternative route into there of million something.
You're gonna need a lot of candy bars.
Yeah, I know it. So I'm just telling you, it's changing just a little and I don't want to change anything unless you guys know it's changed and you're good with some of the different little focus.
Yeah, that's always a balance you have between insignificant low-hanging fruit and significant low-hanging fruit versus if you could only get control of the budget overall from Congress, you would fix all these things.
Right. Okay.
You need a crystal ball too, right?
Yeah, Yeah, mine's about, they'd always ask me on his mortgage, what are the rates gonna do? So I'd pull out this clear marble and say, well, I got my crystal ball here. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Good morning, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. We have 2 items on the agenda tomorrow. A contract completion letter to All Stripes for the installation and upgrade of curve warning signs. That was completed this summer and is just our closeout so we can release any remaining retainage and close out our paperwork with the feds.
That was a Fed grant we got, right?
Yes, that
And
was a
then-
grant.
yeah.
And then the other item we have is the resolution to establish the CRP for the Chapman Road Drainage Improvement Project. So this is on Chapman Road, about milepost .4. There's a spot when we have extremely large events that it starts flooding out a field and eventually threatens a home. So we had a study done on alternatives to make corrections. And so this is our setting up so we can start the engineering of that project.
This is the first time you brought it to us, right?
Yes, this is the first time.
And it's not something that's on the 6-year plan because it's not a road, it's drainage.
It is actually considered part of the 6-year plan because it's directly related to the road. The drainage of the road is causing the problem.
Okay.
By the Woodland High School towards the dike, on the dike road, that is maintained by the county?
Yes, once you get past right in that high school area is where the county maintenance begins.
And that's what was recently paved?
Oh, yeah, well, I believe we overlaid out there.
The high school's inside the city limits though, right?
Correct.
City limits kind of divide the road.
Just beyond the high school toward the river. Yeah.
Yes.
Who's in charge of that, let's say? I rode my bicycle on that over the weekend and there's quite a lip. The white line making the margin of the road has no room at all before you drop down about 2.5 inches onto a fairly narrow amount of gravel.
So they have
Can
not,
be pretty lethal on a bicycle.
yes, they have not come back and shouldered rock. I did not realize that. I will pass that along, that they haven't done that, because usually when we do an overlay, afterwards, the road crew comes along and they build the gravel up next to it to prevent it from rattling and prevent bikes from having the 2-inch drop. But yes, we usually go back and do that. I'll make sure it's on their radar.
The county engineer always has the answers handy.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Susan.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
So Susan, I know that we have somebody that inspects the Silver Lake Dam, control dam, the outlet creek thing. Do we also run the flood control district? Is that part of the flood control district out of your office?
Excuse me. So the flood control district for Silver Lake, yes, we are the engineer and the administrative office for that one.
So we got your budget. Apparently.
Yes. Yes, they did not make any changes this year. And a matter of fact, they dropped their millage rate for 2025. So, but they're just maintaining operations, which for them is mainly mowing and opening and closing the gate to make sure it's still working and checking their culverts regularly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Funk Baxter. Oh, I want to give you a handout.
I prefer a hand up than a hand out. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going over the attachment for our budget amendment, which we will have a public hearing tomorrow for, and this is for the 2024 budget. And we did a pretty thorough, it's a total of 15 pages. I won't go over every single page, but we did a pretty thorough review of revenues and expenditures for revision. And I'm happy to report on the general fund. We pretty much, you'll see that the first line, we're increasing the ending fund balance by $746,000. And that's because we reviewed all the revenue streams, and we have some pretty substantial and significant revenue budget amendments to increase budget for revenue of about $1.2 million. So some of the major expenditure increases on general fund, facilities has an increase, and that is primarily due to the Hall of Justice repairs that have been happening for the last few months. And so they're needing additional budget capacity to cover those expenses and what they anticipate for the rest of the year. So that's like $190,000 just for that one area. We also have on the sheriff's office a little over $77,000 of increases, but a large portion of that has to do with some grants that they have received and some additional overtime that they're experiencing. And so, and then animal control, they added some additional, they added you had previously approved the hiring of a part-time animal control officer. And so here's the budget amendment to follow that up.
A quick question.
Yes.
Was the overtime, my understanding is for the first time in a long time, we have a full staff of deputies. And so the overtime is not necessarily going to carry through to 2025?
I don't anticipate that. They've already submitted their budget for 2025. Yes.
Okay.
And the animal control, the part-time was because we have two people.
And then now we have the
They
part-time to
cover-
help cover with coverage on vacation and things.
So that was the reason behind that.
Juvenile detention had a significant budget amendment, but they're trying to balance it within their own funds, with their own department line items. So they've had quite a few vacancies. Therefore, but as a result, they've had a significant amount of overtime. And so we're reducing direct labor and medical expenses because of those vacancies to help offset the overtime. And then they've also anticipated a reduction in extra help because they've been using existing personnel in the overtime capacity. So they're fairly large numbers, but they're offsetting expenditures with reductions in other line items. The same thing for the prosecuting attorney. They're rehiring a part-time attorney, And so therefore, because of a vacancy, they have some additional funds there that they can move to the extra help line. The next one under non-departmental, these are some reductions in various line items. Because risk, we didn't anticipate that the risk pool would change their billing methodology. They're now billing they used to split their annual bill into two. Part of it would be due in October, about 75% of it, and then the other portion would be due in May. And now they're switching to a calendar year basis. And so their billing for October is for the full year. So we need additional budget capacity over in risk management to cover that. And so I need to ask permission to transfer $570,000 from non-departmental to the risk pool, to our risk account to cover that premium that's due. And so I'm anticipating that we'll be able to, and then next year, be able to return those funds to the non-departmental once we have all our billings done for 2025. So it's a timing difference that's created by this
So you won't,
change.
you won't get a building, what'd you say, May and October?
Yeah,
Yeah, so you
so
won't get a building in May. In
I won't-
2025, you'll get another one in October. That'll be
Right.
For the whole year.
for the whole year, but they are actually going to give me a billing in May for what they call a stub year, because they're changing their billing methodology. So, to a calendar year. So unfortunately, but I've accounted for that in our 2025 budget. So fully accounted for it. Yeah. The other increases are small. We have Superior Court. They received an additional AOC grant for security projects. And so we're accounting for that so that they can spend that at the Hall of Justice for additional cameras and door access codes systems. Then on the general fund on page 3, this is where we went through and analyzed all of the revenues in general fund. And so we've seen an increase in our investment earnings, but we also accounted for decreases as well. For example, I presented to you a couple of weeks ago that I believe our sales tax is going to come in less than what we had budgeted, about $500,000. So we're putting that in the budget amendment now, and we've taken that same number for our 2025 budget, reduced our sales tax. We have other expenses, other revenues that we're looking at for significant increases. For example, in the jail, we're seeing an increase in our what we budgeted, what we estimated originally for the Longview, for example, Longview daily jail charges, and we're increasing that by $390,000. We also have seen some some grants and contracts that the jail has that we didn't have a budget for, and we're now placing a budget of $397,000 there.
What's the SG?
SG just stands for state grants.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And when you see FIG, that's federal.
So bottom line, just taking a look at all the line items, we're about 700, roughly $750,000 ahead of what we thought we were going to be.
Yeah, in the jail, just in the jail alone. Mhm. And then, and so we continue that review over to page 4. So some smaller line items, but we did a very thorough review and look at all of our departments, general fund for their revenues and made the corrections. And so grand total of $1.2 million.
Being in October, you're feeling pretty comfortable with these numbers?
Right,
through
and
the end of the
that's,
year?
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why I kind of wait till the third quarter so that we have some trend analysis that we can see. And in some of the cases where we receive funds only once a year, we have them in by now. And then it also allows us, by doing that, it allows us to look at what we're forecasting out for 2025. So it helped us work with the departments to look at their 2025 revenue at the same time. So.
So I see you zeroed out the LFOs, the legal financial obligations the courts have given up on.
This was in the clerk's office, and
Right.
this is, yeah. So I think we had placed some placeholders there for a while, and they were carried over in the budget and probably shouldn't have been.
It is interesting when decisions are made by the court and they issue a fine. They issue the fine knowing full well we're not going to collect it, which is unfortunate, but
Yeah.
they're
so-
operating under rules from the state Supreme Court that to require extensive investigations for determining whether they can afford to pay the fine. You can't charge them a fine if they can't afford to pay.
Yeah.
So rather than do the investigations, they just don't fine.
And then as we continue on, we also did some review of other funds. That was all the general funds. And then, for example, y'all had, when we had talked about the financial report last, our timber excise tax on road fund was, we had underestimated. And so this trues up, adjusts to actuals. And so that's the $733,000 or almost $34,000 to the road fund for the timber excise tax. They also correspondingly increased ending fund balance for that revenue, basically. So there's the offset. So revenues offset expenses.
I notice revenue for traffic infractions is up 60 grand.
Yeah, that's back on page 4.
Right.
Mhm,
Page 3.
page 3. Yep, so like I said, we looked at every single department.
Maybe that's more revealing of me than anybody else.
You're not contributing to this account, are you?
I take the fifth.
So in some cases, the increase, like for example, veterans, it's increasing, the revenue is increasing because the investment earnings are exceeded what we've originally budgeted. And then they're offsetting expenses. So really, as far as then some of the next ones, we've got human services. They just did a very thorough review of their revenues and expenses. In total, it's a $24,000 change. Not very significant. And as I said, it's mostly increase in their investment earnings over what we originally had budgeted. Most people were conservative on those budgets. Then the mental health revenue, investment earnings are significantly higher, but we trued up the mental health tax. And that was a $55,000 decrease. I'm sorry, I'm on page 6 too. And so on mental health, behavioral health, we have slight increases in income. And that was offset with some increases in expenses. So I'm going to skip to anything that's significant.
Kathy, I'm sorry, I'm behind you a little bit. The chemical dependency mental health revenue. You have that listed as an expenditure. If the mental health tax is an expenditure, that confuses me. Everything else is for expenses, but all of a sudden you have a tax treated as an expenditure.
Well,
Do you see where I'm talking?
So we first show the revenue, any changes in revenue, and then we show any changes in expenses right after that.
So we're spending 752,000.
Well, that's revenue. That's what we've actually brought in for the mental health for the first 3 months of the year, because that was the tax that we sunset. So we wanted to true up the revenues to equal what we've actually brought in.
It's just that maybe that's just out of place as a revenue. Everything else on that page are expenditures, mileage, overtime,
Yeah.
labor.
Well, we tried it on the different funds where there's, like, for example, you go to page 5, road funds, the first one. So we try to show the revenue first, if there's any changes, and then the changes in expenses. And so we do that for if there are changes in revenues, and then there's changes in expenses.
Thank you.
So they're really and then page. We're
Just
also,
another question of ignorance. There are entries that by title are duplicated. What's the significance there? Like tuition and registration, advertising, photocopies, page 6.
page 6, what happens is if there's a different bars for it will show up as 2 different lines.
I thought I checked that, but I missed it. There's a 6 and there's an 8. Okay, I got it.
Mhm. A lot of numbers on this.
Yeah.
And then,
This is the Barnes Code is a good example of where the government, we're here to help you. And it's
We're here to
totally
help
unintelligible.
It should be like a 3-page document instead of.
Well, she's memorizing the code. You've got most of the numbers down now, but
I've learned.
yeah, it's.
I know which one is law enforcement too, which is one of our larger ones.
Well,
And-
as soon as you get it down, would you let us know so we can tell them it's okay to change them now?
Oh, they'll probably change them. Most of the health and human services, you'll see there's an actual extra document for you. It's towards the back, and that explains all of their changes. They did a very good job and very thorough of explaining where and why they're making most of these changes. And So that, they've explained all of those. And they're by far, they're like, start on page 6 and they continue through page 9. And so they've explained all of their changes. And then,
You see the $440,000 income for the opioid cases, the lawsuits.
yeah, the opioid funds, they're truing up what we've actually received so far this year. And then they placed the rest of it in, they adjusted the expenditure budget to increase ending fund balance. And I think that was on page,
So
that was on page 11. Mhm.
on the low-income housing and O&M, there's a $4.6 million expenditure. I'm assuming those are the contract awards to Housing Authority to CAP and campus towers. And the one that is adjusted out is probably the Kelso building that hasn't started yet.
I need to find that,
That's over on page 9, sorry.
page 9.
About 1/3 up from the bottom.
Well, mine is a little, my page numbers may be off now that I look at this. Because,
Page 9 out of 15. That helps.
yeah, so that is, you're looking at the line that's for low income, where they've changed professional services and contracts
Correct.
and decrease of a total of $1 million. And that, they've explained that they said they're decreasing professional services because of project not yet billed. And they're also decreasing professional services for the Department of Commerce not yet spent. And they believe those will be spent in 2025. I don't think there's any other ones that are significant. Expo Center and the Conference Center, they went through their expenditures and made some adjustments. But in total, they're not very significant. They also increased on the Silver Lake gift shop, they increased their revenues.
You're on
page 12.
Thank you.
They've increased their revenues, but they've also increased some of their expenditures and their ending fund to account for an ending fund balance increase of $60,000. So. And then I'll jump to page 13 for another pretty significant change. And this has to do with, we made a change to information technology. When we were doing the cost allocations, I thoroughly analyzed their fund balance and discovered that their fund balance had been understated for their operating account. to the tune of about $1.5 million. And then we're now turning around and we're going to transfer that excess fund balance over to the reserve account because we want to maintain a small fund balance in the operating account, but make sure that the reserve account has the vast majority of the fund balance. So it's available for capital replacement, renewals, and things like that. And so their fund balance will go up from a little over 3 million to almost $5 million when it's fully adjusted. And then we also have the transfer in that I'm reporting for risk management of $570,000 so that they have the budget capacity to pay the insurance premiums assessments that are coming due this month in October. And so we're utilizing both the fund balance and that transfer in to increase the line for insurance premiums by $1 million to cover the billing. And then another item on page 15 to bring to your attention is the PFD, because they're part of our budget. They're accounted for as part of Cowlitz. They had a item for their theater that they needed to pay, a repair, it's a construction-related invoice, about a little over 200,000. And so they're utilizing part of their fund balances to transfer and make sure that they have enough budget capacity to cover that invoice. And that's what the last page is. And that's all my budget amendments. There's a lot of them.
Next one in late January? Or for February, I guess it's usually in February.
Yeah.
After the January bills get paid.
Typically we have something in
You plan on being
February.
around, right?
Not me.
Not I.
We, and then again, sometimes we have one in December if there's things that we find, but I'm hoping this will be the last budget amendment for 2024.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. And thank
appreciate
the
the background.
departments. Yeah. HHS did a good job of
Yeah, they
explaining
did.
all their changes. So
Yeah,
that was
they had
good to see.
they had a lot of changes, so they put together a nice little info packet on it.
Yeah.
So it was very helpful. Any other questions for me?
I think so. There might be some tomorrow during public hearings. So.
Yeah.
Not necessarily from us, but from audience.
Yeah, we'll be ready.
Okay. Okay. We can, I see Jessica in here. Do you gentlemen have anything miscellaneous, or we move into human resources? Okay, Jessica, why don't we just do that?
Good morning, Jessica Warren, Human Resources. I have a request for 2 executive sessions under performance of a public employee.
time estimate? I know that's always the
Uh,
question, right?
let's say 20 total
20
for both, yeah.
for both, okay. Okay, we will adjourn to exception for performance of a public employee, 2 cases of it, 20 minutes total.
You know, plug it, maybe plug.
Hey, back for exception. No decisions were made. Turn it over.
Jessica Resource. If I were to fill an assistant county engineer at 6.5. Position employee, the county, and this is budgeted.
That has a straight question. Are you listening? Maybe Kelly anyhow, do have this in terms of a motion in order to go in the minutes that people say.
Usually maybe do hard.
But we're formal motion, there'd be and do we do that even with these action? And we,
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah.
I just remember.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything?
I say, cut the typing and reading and I was debating they're bringing that up, but I am in fact standard practice. It's kind of.
And it's not mentioned.
Well, it's the other thing. I know in the not of, but I got to be with you does weak thing.
So you have green link till Chris with Paul Frank.
Cross principle or
No. See,
There-
that's
there-
parking lane, turn lane. So
There's a section, there is it, where you go, the bike's on your right, crop front and left.
so you're right. I do that. It interests me.
You know,
I just see it personally.
yeah, well, the other thing, what's in there, are you build it and will come? Maybe around here, that's questionable, but a goal is supposed to like the rules of the road, just like and follow forward lanes. If I take a little turn left, actually find them. And I yelled at doing that.
Get out of the way, right?
Yeah, and I'd never take the right away from a car. Cyclists are from A to Z. You got the cyclist coming down the street. He should give that person a citation. And whenever
By the way, there's an extra wide sidewalk, which is designated the bike lane. And there are hedges right up next to the sidewalk. So there's a driveway and you can't see anybody coming until it's too late. I mean, it's a crazy.
it's suicide to ride on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
If you're on a Sunday stroll with your tricycle and you're
Yeah.
6 years
It's
old,
different.
please stay on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Talking to my son from San Diego, and the entire coastal area of San Diego it's just peppered with e-bicycles.
Oh, I can imagine, yeah.
You go down to the beach and you'll see a wreck where you had never seen before, and it's nothing but e-bicycles. There are e-bicycles there that are, and the kids see that wants the last one. On it, it's all the was really happening.
The right place, but it seems to me that the only time I see EVs is in one of the plug-in chargers. Is that PUD lot? Well, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Often you were. Well.
Yeah.
Are increases of electric cars. So.
I found a constant worry the general press to say quite e-bikes.
That's true.
As an airplane, fly is bike.
True.
Hey,
But
don't worry about bicycles sticking around the hedge. Oh.
Or early doors like that.
All right.